to the Canadian Podcow, a brand new podcast made by dairy farmers for dairy farmers and anyone interested in the Canadian dairy industry. My name is Sarah Sash, and I'll be your co-host, along with my friend Andrew Campbell.
Which I'm very excited to do this with you, Sarah, because together I think we're going to explore different issues related to the dairy industry. We're going to learn, understand, and analyze all of this and share with you our perspectives on Canadian dairy, both here at home as well as around the world.
Well, thanks, Andrew. I'm so looking forward to it. We're totally looking forward to talking to everyone out there about the issues that affect our industry. For example, we'll be analyzing market trends and international trade. We'll talk about new developments in research related to dairy production and dairy products. We're going to talk about government policies related to agriculture. The list goes on.
It does go on, Sarah. I mean, we could also talk about dairy nutrition. We can talk about crops. We can talk about the environment, as well as the sustainability story that I think Canadian dairy farmers bring to the story about the environment. And I think the best way to do that is to invite experts, politicians, analysts, and, of course, invite dairy farmers and give the floor to them too. But first of all, I thought the best thing to do, Sarah, if you're up for this, is we'll start by introducing ourselves. So thanks for being with us here on the Canadian Podcow. We hope you enjoy it.
First, let's start talking about you, Andrew. I'm looking forward to learning more about you. Can you tell me more about where you're from? I mean, I know you're from Ontario. What else can you tell us about where you're located and what it is that you do?
Sure, Sarah. So I am here in southern Ontario. The county is Middlesex we're in, just west of the city of London. It's the farm that I grew up on, the farm my mom grew up on, and we've been milking. I will be third generation here on the farm that actually milks cows. My grandpa, he started milking cows because he went against the family business, which was like famed sheep genetics that went around the world because he didn't like sheep and wanted cows, I guess. So he bought this farm, put cows in, and we've been here ever since, Sarah.
I love that it came to the family through your mom's side. That's a neat story.
It is, actually. So my dad was actually raised on a pig farm. And so they started milking cows on a different spot. And then my grandpa decided he was ready to retire. So they came and took over his farm and they moved here, kicked him into town.
So familiar with farming, but not on the cow side.
Exactly. So, but my dad is one that is not afraid to put hours in a day. So dairy farming fit him and mom very well.
Like a well-tailored suit.
That's exactly right. He wouldn't know what to do with his free time. So
So how long have you yourself been involved with the dairy business, Andrew?
So I actually left the farm to go to school, assuming that I would not be home to farm. I actually had great intentions of taking over for Peter Mansbridge, hosting the National. Yes. I was the very cool 15-year-old that read the paper and watched the news. So that's basically what I had decided I wanted to do. When I moved off the farm, I quickly realized that to have that job, you have to live in the city. And I lived on Main Street in Wingham, Ontario, which, for those that don't know where Wingham, Ontario is a town of about 2,500. And I thought traffic was atrocious. I couldn't stand all of the people around. And so clearly I would not have done well in the city. So I decided, and by that time, I'd met my wife, Jess, and we decided that, actually that farm back home would be a pretty great lifestyle and business and all of that. So we decided to move back, and we've been officially on the farm now for about 10 years, although we were helping out before that for a few years before that, just through the transition and that. So yeah, it's been 10 years actually. I all of a sudden feel old, Sarah.
We're not talking about that today.
Oh, okay. We won't talk about that today.
I think this is really encouraging, though, for farm families to hear stories about farm children who leave the farm and then are like, oh, yes, what I really want to do now is return to the farms. Because you hear that people are trying to ask their kids to, go out, get an education, spend some time away from the business and see if it's really for you. So that's fantastic that you made that decision to come back to the farm.
Yeah, it was and I'm glad I did as well, because I think that had I just, stayed home on the farm, I'd kind of always wonder like, oh, I wonder what that would have been like. But, doing it in this order, like there's no regrets to it. And the nice thing is I kind of have this journalism background behind me, and it's come in handy, and I still use it on a regular basis when, you talk to consumers about agriculture, when, the media calls and wants some information about things. I feel like I can be helpful in those just because of the background. So, it all worked out for good reason, Sarah.
Oh, it's a key skill set for dairy farming, I'm learning in recent times. And it stuck with me when you said to me in a prior discussion that you diversify your portfolio basically in your farm with doing journalism and, some side jobs of that nature, and then additionally spending so much time as you do on the dairy farm.
Yeah, it was actually funny because when we did come home to farm, I think we fit in a lot of those succession plans where, we wanted to come home, but there's only so much money the farm can put out in terms of salaries and, kind of living wages. And when I came home, it wasn't there for the farm. And so we talked about, well, do we get more beef cattle? Do we get goats? Do we get sheep? Do we get, what do we do? And, pretty quickly it was kind of like, oh, wait a minute. If I just go buy a laptop and a new cell phone, I could actually, kind of make a living on a few kind of side projects. And, that kind of turned into, since then, my wife and I now have a communications company, Fresh Air Media. And, it works really well that I can balance. I don't do near as much of that stuff through the summertime, but, when things are a little quieter in the winter, then I can kind of hunker down in my office and help different groups and companies across the country. And it's just a fun way to stay involved in the entire agriculture sector and get perspectives from other people across the country.
Oh, I think that's really great. In terms of the farming operation itself, can you tell us a bit about your dairy, how many cows you're milking, what kind of situation you have going with the actual farm business?
Sure. So we milk about 65 cows. It's a partnership that we have with my wife and I and my mom and dad. And then we've got our two kids, Bella and Cash, who are 9 and 7. And so they're obviously quite helpful too around the farm now. And so we've had that for a decade as a tie stall barn. We actually, as I speak, they are pushing ground for our new robot barn. So it's going to be a very exciting winter around here, because we've kind of decided that that's where our future will lie for at least the dairy side, and we're kind of excited to not kind of excited, we're very excited to kind of make that investment.
Not just a little bit.
Not just a little. Oh my goodness, it's exciting days, Sarah. We're really thrilled to be doing this, and we're really excited for what's going to come in the next couple of years, and just to build the future of the dairy side of our farm business.
Oh, that's super exciting. I'm excited for you, having gone through that myself. We'll talk about that later, but it's just a fantastic transition, and the opportunity on the other side of it is really exciting and encouraging. So what kind of challenges are you facing in your area? I know this was an awful summer for a lot of people in different parts of the country. What are some challenges that you're seeing in Ontario right now, or has it been a pretty decent summer there?
That would depend on the week you would ask me, Sarah, because it's one of those where, it was one of the best springs we had in terms of getting crop in. And it's actually the first, one of my brothers has come in on the grain side of our farm business. And so it was kind of his first year to plant his first farm. And you couldn't have asked for a better spring. So we did that. It got a little dry, then it got very wet, then it got nice again. And now, into the fall, we've finished up corn silage. Beans are around the corner. The crops actually do, for kind of the ups and downs we've had, yields actually look pretty fantastic. So, I've got to say that the year we've had has been a pretty good year. We'll, obviously until it's in the bin, we're not so sure, but, we're pretty confident it's looking pretty good.
So tell me about these grains. In the part of the country that I'm farming in, it is not a thing. So how many acres in total is your operation, and what kinds of different crops do you do?
So our main crops are, we obviously grow for the cows. We grow corn for silage, as well as a bit of corn for grain corn. We grow some hay, mostly alfalfa, and that kind of does it for the feed side. And we're pretty fortunate that we can grow the vast majority of the feed we need for the herd right here on our farm. And then we also grow soybeans and wheat are kind of the other two main crops we do. And that's, for here in southern Ontario, that's a pretty typical grain rotation is the corn, soybeans, wheat. We definitely are among great company in, kind of the entire province growing those three. Those are the main crops here.
I'm going to learn things here too.
It's fun. It's a fun, kind of added challenge that, some days when you don't feel like being in the barn, you can sit and be in a tractor for, kind of the entire day and just, try your hand at something different. So yeah, it's an interesting farm business to be involved in too.
And we'll finish up here with one more. What encouraged you to want to do this podcast? Like, why do the podcast? Why get involved in this project and connecting with producers across the country?
That's a good question, Sarah. I think, part of it is that, I enjoy listening to podcasts pretty regularly. It's actually, when I go out in the morning, my podcasts have kind of downloaded from the night before, and I put my earbuds in and I go mix feed and clean mangers and do bedding. And that is actually, what I listen to now almost every morning. And, it's a great way to absorb, different perspectives, different things from different industries. I love listening to business podcasts from other sectors as well, just to try to get some ideas and, thoughts from other people in other parts of the country and other parts of the world about, maybe what could be relevant here, what we could do. And that's really what I think we can do here with this podcast, and why I'm so excited to be a part of it is, how can we take some of these key issues that I think we as farmers, think about, or maybe, it's an issue for one area of the country, but another area never thought of it. How can we share some of that information back and forth? And how can we have these conversations that, everybody across the country can listen in on and be a part of, and, hopefully learn something. And I think we're all better off for knowing some of that information.
We have such vast diversity across the country in terms of the way we run our operations and what our farms are like and all of those things, but so much in common. So I'm definitely looking forward to the conversations too, Andrew. Thank you so much for telling us a bit about yourself. We're going to stop for a short message from our sponsor, and we'll be right on back.
If you ask Canadian dairy farmers what it takes to become global leaders in sustainable farming, they might say,
conserving wetlands with Ducks Unlimited Canada.
Working with clean farms to find innovative ways to reduce plastics.
Supporting biodiversity with Tree Canada.
If you ask dairy cows, well, they always say the same thing.
Dairy Farmers of Canada, doing more today because we're here for tomorrow. Find out more at herefortomorrow.ca.
Well, now, Sarah, you get to be in the hot seat this time, and which is very exciting for me. We get to learn a little bit about you and, how you've come to have your farm and be involved in the dairy industry and get more and more involved in the dairy industry over the last few years. So maybe, Sarah, we can kind of start with, you can give us a little bit of a history lesson on yourself is, where are you from and how did you end up on the farm in BC? Because I know it's not one you grew up on.
Yeah, nope. So I'm from a very small town in the West Kootenays of BC. I was raised in a town of 350 people. And then I grew up in the forest industry myself and went to UBC. And I have a Bachelor of Arts degree from there. And then I worked in the mining industry in Vancouver. And then eventually I was in a wedding in Chilliwack, which is a very agricultural community here in BC. And there I met my husband, who is a dairy farmer. So we got married in 2009, I think. Oh boy. We've been married for 12 years anyway. And so I've been living on the farm here and have just become increasingly involved both in the family business as well as in the industry in the province here in BC.
That is very cool to just like, as fate would have it, here you are in the dairy industry, probably never thinking in your lifetime, wouldn't it be amazing to marry a strapping young dairy farmer? Like that must have never have come up before.
He'll be pumped you called him strapping.
Well, we'll keep it our secret for now. So don't need his ego too big.
No, truthfully, I would never have ever thought I would be involved in agriculture, but having been involved in 2 other resource industries prior to joining it, there's certainly a lot of similarity. And in terms of my skill set, like when I was working in the city, I worked as a corporate secretary for a publicly traded company listed on the TSX. And so I have a lot of skills in terms of governance and minute taking and all kinds of things that are not really naturally things that people know a lot of stuff about in the dairy industry. But the more you get involved in the industry, the more you learn there's such a business side to it. There's all the organized, governance side. There's the interprovincial stuff that goes on. And I guess it's when we built our barn, we built a robotic barn in 2015 on the farm here. And I really wanted to connect with producers who also had the same technology. So I started going on social media more. I was on Instagram just to look at other people's barns that they were building or had built, and then to share about what was happening in the process of building ours. And I started connecting with people that way. And then I was able to grow a larger and larger following. I was unsuccessful at the whole thing of connecting outside of the dairy industry, I would say. I do not give myself a win on that, which was probably my original intent, was to connect outside. But what I did was really, really connect inside and get to know a lot of dairy producers all across the country through social media and become really more well-known in our province. And eventually I was able to get involved in industry leadership over a number of years through those connections, because as a person who came from outside the industry, when I first got here, I was like, well, there's no chance I'm ever going to be able to do this because no one knows who I am. Everyone's been so involved in the industry for so very long and has all these family ties and all those sorts of things going. And I didn't have that, but I guess I was able to build a base by connecting with people through pictures and stories and information about my farm and my family.
Well, then let's talk about that, because when you talk about industry involvement, I mean, you're not bragging enough. You are the vice chair of BC Dairy. You have a hugely important role in the dairy industry, obviously in Canada, but especially in BC. I'm curious, not everybody is called to the great world of meeting rooms and, nowadays, Microsoft team meetings, but you sound, I can already hear it from you. You enjoy it. You want to be involved with it. Why?
I love it. I think the original thing is when I was involved just on social, then I started being connected with people and they kept saying to me, well, where can I buy your milk? Like, how can I get your milk? I want milk that just came from your farm. And then I was like, well, it's Canada, we're supply managed here. And then I had to get further and further down the path of explaining what the benefits of that are and why everyone's milk is part of the picture. And, so then I found I wasn't just speaking for myself, I was speaking for an industry when I was trying to just say what it is that I do here. And so that kind of grew and grew. And back in 2016, I was invited to, there used to be in the West a development conference called the Future Leaders Development Conference. And I was fortunate to go there. And that's the first time that I had met producers from other provinces. So there were people there from all of the West, and a couple from Gayley had come as well. And so I made connections with all these different farmers, and then was able to see how province to province there's so many differences, and as you move across the country everything's done differently. I was shocked at the time someone was milking, they had 2 robots running, and then additionally they were milking in a parlor at the same time, and I was like, what are you talking about? I wasn't familiar with people like you were describing, grain farming and cash cropping and all these sorts of things that are happening, and coming from outside the industry, I just had no clue about the diversity of it. So I became really intrigued with that and wanted to know more and get more involved and connect with more people. And I just went for it with that.
Well, it's exciting. So then, in your role, I would assume there's obviously the, board governance. There would be some government lobbying. There'd be some policy work. What's your favorite part? What brings you the most joy out of being involved with BC Dairy at the board level?
Well, that's a challenging question to answer, Andrew, given the 2 years we've just been through, or whatever it is. It feels like 2 years already. But with the pandemic, it certainly changed what the look of advocacy and lobbying and all those things is or feels like to me. We used to travel a lot. We used to meet people and be having, side conversations, and that's really what fueled me, is all of this learning and all of the energy that I picked up from that, from traveling and seeing people and, sitting on the plane next to someone and sharing my story, and then getting to a meeting and sitting at lunch with someone and learning their story. And, I would always come home with something new to bring to the farm, like asking about, have we ventilated the barn this way, or is there a reason we did it that way? Like, I always had something new. And so Zoom really took that away, it felt like, and everyone will know what that feels, but it was just gone. So it's really been a lot more of the functional side of dairy, but the work that we've been able to achieve in that time, like, much respect to all of the staff in all of the provinces and at the national organization who are still plugging away, working on behalf of producers in this time. The work that's been accomplished in the time that we've been having to work in this format is going to serve us so well into the future. And like you mentioned, governance, it's not a fun part of being involved in any type of, national organization or things like that. But having good governance and having the foundation set to that really, that's the rules of engagement, and it sets up your organization to be successful in the future. So we've been able to spend a lot more time on that than we would have been doing. So I'm chair of governance here in BC. So if anyone ever wants to talk governance, you know who to call. But also I love the advocacy side, and we've really been able to dive into that in BC during the pandemic times. We've been meeting, I've met with probably 35 or 40 separate politician meetings this year on Zoom. So it's a great way to connect with them. We are able to just Zoom into their offices and talk to them and get involved. And so the number of people, I've definitely broadened my network during this time in doing what I do. And now I'm up for re-election this fall, so we'll see if after November I am just a podcaster.
Just a podcaster. Easy, Sarah. Just a podcaster. You're supposed to put excitement to it. You are a podcaster. That's the excitement now. And if this podcast doesn't work, how about a governance podcast? I bet you'd be great at that too.
I don't think anyone would listen.
Well, you talked about, I do want to switch gears a little bit because I do want to know a little bit more about your farm too. That obviously, you've been able to, widen your network over the last couple of years, partly because you don't have to leave the farm anymore. So, when you are at your farm office, what surrounds you? How many cows are there? You mentioned you've got robots, which I'm jealous of a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your farm.
Well, I'm fortunate to operate a farm business here with my husband, Gene, and my brother-in-law, Grant. And we're on their parents. Their parents started the farm here in the early 1970s. So they're third-generation dairy farmers. I obviously am a farm import to that. But we, in 2015, built the 3-robot barn. So we milk as of today, Jean says it's 142 cows we're milking. And we raise all of our young stock on the farm. So in terms of my role here, I manage our calf program. I work in the barn on weekends all of the time, and then I'm just basically a general gopher, doer of the things. I do all of our business functions on the farm, and then I drive buggy and rake grass and do that type of stuff also, but I'm only part-time. So that really gave me the opportunity in, like, Jean and Grant farming together. They are both full-time on the farm. I'm part-time on the farm doing the business work for them, and then I'm able to fill in that other part of my time. Not only that, but I'm a mom to 2 boys on the farm. They're 11 and 9, and so I have the flexibility to be around when they need me, and then I just fill in the rest of the time with this industry stuff that we were speaking about. So that's kind of what our adventures here look like. And in terms of the size of the farm, we're farming about 150 acres. And grow our own corn and grass and that sort of thing, but no grains.
Well, it's a different climate, though, in BC. I've had the fortune of being there several times, and, like, wheat's tough to grow there.
Well, I lied to you because corn's a grain, I guess.
Well,
we don't use it like grain.
But it is. It's a different. It's a completely different environment. I always love driving through the area through BC because it is so different, in terms of, both environment and climate. And, like, you talk about the importance of advocacy. Like, when you're in BC, it is the most important because you are probably next door to 1 million people in the city. Like, and by next door, I mean, like, right there. Like, it's different there.
Yeah, it's definitely, like, even in our community here in Chilliwack is an agricultural-based community, but we're now a community of over 100,000 people. So it really does change. Like, you're just right on the interface of it all the time. And that I serve on our agriculture council in the community as well. Like, we have an agricultural advisory council at the city of Chilliwack. I do that work because just trying to connect across the, you don't want to ever make it sound, it's us and them all the time, but agriculture is part of the fabric of what we do here. But there's so much else going on. We've got tons of people moving from big cities out this way because of affordability of housing and all those sorts of things. And they're just not familiar yet with what agriculture is and what it does in the community and what's beneficial about it and why it smells. So.
Well, step one, they need to listen to the Canadian Podcow. Then they might understand more. So when we talk about the podcast, Sarah, why did you say yes to being a host? What excites you about being part of the podcast?
That whole communication piece, to me, that's the most fascinating thing at this point in the industry, is trying to, it's not so much what we say, but how we say it. I'm finding the more we do in dairy, you can have everything sorted out. You could have a plan for what you're going to do, but if you don't do it, it's relevant to the people you're trying to reach, it kind of, guts the thing a bit. And so I'm excited to connect in this format. I think it's really been a great way to, connect with farmers and reach them where they're at. I'm always talking about reaching people where they're at. And I think, like you say, if you can catch us in the mixer wagon, or you can catch it while you're out, dragging pipes around the field that you don't want to be moving, and it brings a little brightness to your day and helps you learn a little something and just kind of gets you out of the farm bubble for a little bit, it'll be worth it. And so I'm looking forward to that side of it and just growing connection and getting to know more about producers as they get to learn more about us and all of our guests. So that's kind of sums it up for me.
It's definitely going to be exciting, Sarah. I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to doing this with you.
Likewise. I remember way back in the day you came and presented at our dairy conference here in BC. It has to be, 8 or 10 years ago.
It was not yesterday. Let's not talk years. Let's not talk years. Yeah.
I still think you're young, so you're good.
Phew. You haven't seen me for 8 or 9 years. Perfect.
We are the OGs of social media here. But yeah, we're going ahead actually in person with our dairy conference, I think, this year. So it'll be good. I've almost forgotten what seeing people in person feels like. That's all for this first episode of the Canadian Podcow. Thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time to download it.
We hoped you liked it as much as we enjoyed putting it together. So if you did, we hope you'll take a minute to share it on your networks, on your media. You could share it on Facebook, Twitter, everywhere. It would be greatly appreciated to have your support and have others in the dairy industry find it.
We would also like to thank Dairy Farmers of Canada, who made this podcast possible, and Bruce Sargent for the production.
And a heads up, we have invited Pierre Lampron, the president of the Dairy Farmers of Canada, for our next episode, and we're going to talk about the federal election and a whole lot more. It's going to be a great episode, I think, Sarah.
We hope you'll be there. Thank you, and talk to you soon.